6:37, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Good morning to you, friends. Along with Johnny B, Joan Jones, I'm Dan Mandis. EJ Haust is joining us on the Newsmaker Hotline. EJ, always great to have you on. And, man, what a great morning to have you on. I don't know, did you happen to watch the interview that Kamala did last night on CBS? I've got a couple of sound bites. And I got to tell you, and of course, I'm a conservative, and everybody knows that I don't like Kamala Harris anyway, but there were some moments that were a little cringy. I'm going to play one of them real quick right now, and then I'll get your comments on it. But she was asked about whether or not she was honest with Americans when she said that Joe Biden was fit to run the country.
Can you say that you were honest with the American people about what you saw in those moments with President Biden as you were with him again and again, repeatedly in that time?
Well, prepare for the gaslighting.
Of course. Joe Biden is an extremely accomplished, experienced, and capable in every way that anyone would want if they're president.
And you never saw anything like what happened at the debate night behind closed doors with him?
It was a bad debate. People have bad debates. He is absolutely...
But that's the reason why you're here, and he's not running for the top of the ticket.
Well, you'd have to ask him if that's the only reason why.
What do you think?
You might want to ask Nancy Pelosi what she thinks, because that is, she's one of the people that arranged for Joe Biden to leave the campaign. But EJ, I mean, I don't know if you saw the interview on CBS, but what do you think about that moment?
I did. I watch these things because, well, I know a lot of people don't want to, and they want the clips only, so you can go on X and get them.
And here we are.
Because I want to see more than just the questions asked and the canned answers. I want to see cadence. I want to see what rattles her. You can tell when she has to give an unscripted answer. Her demeanor changes. She shakes her head quite a bit. And then the tone of her voice gets very high pitched. And so that's a telltale sign of somebody who's trying to convince you of something. And I don't believe that she believes it when she's saying it. And so I find that interesting that after all this time, she still doesn't have an answer for that question. But it's very clear in her response that she doesn't believe what she's saying, in my opinion.
Well, and I love that the reporter said, you know what? The question, and I've said this for a long time, maybe I said it to you, EJ, but I've been saying for a long time, either your judgment is way off or you're lying. And that's exactly what she was asked. Listen.
It's a judgment question. That's why I ask. Can the American people trust you in these moments, even when it's maybe uncomfortable for Americans to level with Americans in that way? So that's why I ask. And it sounds like what you're saying is you feel like you never saw anything like that from President Biden.
I have worked with Joe Biden, hours and hours and hours over these 4 years, whether it be in the Situation Room or the Oval Office. Joe Biden is the one who was able to bring NATO together during a crisis where, for the first time in 70 years, Europe saw and has seen war.
You know, I actually, EJ, love that soundbite because the reporter says it's a judgment question exactly. And so then she goes on to talk about Biden and war and all this. Well, one of the reasons why Russia invaded Ukraine was because of the failed pullout of Afghanistan.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, notice that she goes back to her scripted answer, and now she has her more monotone, reasonable, pitch is normal and that sort of thing. So, she goes back to that script and she kind of gets back in the groove of it. But really, she doesn't say anything. She doesn't answer the question, can we trust you? She doesn't answer the question, is it a judgment thing? We're questioning your judgment. Is it, was it a lie or was it judgment? Or, and she doesn't answer. And that's typical for her, though, right? Every answer is scripted. And when she goes off script is when we get these moments of truth. And that just wasn't one of them. The second question there that you played, she goes back to her original tone. It's obviously a canned answer that she's memorized that's in her head.
She was also asked about her trans policies.
Do you believe that transgender Americans should have access to gender-affirming care in this country?
Okay, so EJ, will you help me? So that's not exactly the right question to ask, because a lot of people will say, you know, do what you want as an adult, knock yourself out. But number one, who pays for it? Who gets it? Are we talking about kids, gender mutilation, and puberty blockers on 12-year-olds? What are we talking about? Are we talking about inmates? Are we talking about illegal aliens? So to me, and I'll let you comment on that, but that's the wrong question to ask.
Agreed. It's too open-ended and very obvious, the answer, right? Like, of course, people who need medical care should be able to receive medical care, right? Like, that's not a hard question. The definition of medical care and who pays for it and how old are they, you know, that's another whole question. It's just it's a nuanced issue that requires a lot more depth than that very simple question.
It is an incredibly nuanced issue. And this, by the way, was her answer.
I made sure that they changed the policy in the state of California so that every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access to the medical care that they desired and need.
That was an audio bite from, I don't know when that was, a while ago. That was not last night. This is what she said last night.
I believe we should follow the law. I mean, I think you're probably pointing to the fact that Donald Trump's campaign has spent tens of millions of dollars.
Oh, by the way, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but EJ, if you watch this, you know that she said, I'm going to follow the law. And then she went on literally, friends, for like 2 minutes talking about Donald Trump and all things Donald Trump. And it was one of those canned answers. And so, you know, when she says, I'm going to follow the law, to be perfectly candid, I don't really know what that means at this point, because if she was elected president, she could try to change laws.
Right. And clearly she changed the law in California, as displayed in your previous clip. So she's really talking in circles here. What I find really interesting, particularly for those of us here in Middle Tennessee who've been deeply affected by it, you know, if the Covenant shooter had made her way to prison, she would have been eligible under a Harris presidency to get a taxpayer-funded trans surgery. And when you put it in those terms and you realize that monster would have been eligible under Kamala Harris to receive a surgery on a taxpayer dime, it's disgusting. And I don't see many people bringing up like other examples of really awful killers, and there are plenty who would be eligible under her policy in California.
I want to move on to her town hall with Maria Shriver that was clearly staged.
You're not, unfortunately. We have some predetermined questions, and hopefully I'll be able to ask some of the questions that might be in your head. I hope so.
Did you think that they cringed backstage when Maria Shriver came out and actually admitted that right before the thing got started, that, well,
yes,
I mean,
the quiet part out loud.
Yes, that's exactly right. I mean, this thing, and it was so quiet and so boring. She's got Liz Cheney out there too, and they're just talking about the same talking points.
And it's funny because it's a town hall. Like, the whole point is that the town gets to ask you questions and you're supposed to be off script, right? But meanwhile, these are the same people that went completely bananas over Donald Trump, quote unquote, staging a McDonald's shift, right? Like, of course that was pre-scripted, not scripted necessarily. Obviously, you can tell by the conversations he had with the workers and things there that it was very off the cuff, but it was pre-planned event because the man is running for president. He's not actually applying for a job at McDonald's.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And they also need to make sure that the cars that go through the drive-thru don't have bombs in them. I mean,
of course,
there's certain things he needs to do.
Of course. And I'm sure the people were screened coming to the town hall and such too. But, you know, that should be enough. Make sure that they're safe and they're not going to do anything, that they don't bring weapons into a town hall. But other than that, you know, a town hall is supposed to be unscripted. And so, you know, you have, it's just an interview with a live audience at that point. There's no town hall about it.
Real quick, in the news today, we've got the Atlantic and Jeffrey Goldberg. He is out there reporting. I know that it's early and you just got up, but the Atlantic is reporting that Donald Trump called a murdered Army private an effing Mexican. The New York Times also is out there with a hit piece today saying that John Kelly, of course, used to work in the Trump administration, saying that Donald Trump showed fascist tendencies. You know, a lot of these things, of course, supposedly a lot of this happened 4 years ago and some even further back. This is clearly what they would call an October surprise. I've told the story already twice today. I'm sure you're familiar with it. But do you believe any of this is going to have an impact on the independent voter?
I don't. I really don't. You know, we've heard similar stories in the past that end up being debunked.
Yep.
John Kelly is not somebody who's going to move the needle. Independent voters, if there are any out there that are undecided about which candidate they support, John Kelly is not going to be the one to flip them to one side or the other, right? Like, he might motivate a few people to go out and vote early, but anybody who knows who John Kelly is or who would read The Atlantic, they're already decided. And so I think it's just another nothing burger. It doesn't move the needle. You know, it's funny. We've seen all these stories as Trump supporters over and over and over again. We don't need these stories to help us make our decisions or anything anymore. But what I find funny is, like, it doesn't faze us either. I mean, they could come out with a credible story. And to be clear, I don't really believe this one. I think that's just silly. John Kelly is a massive anti-Trumper and has been for years. But we're buying T-shirts that say, "I'm voting for the felon and the hillbilly."
Yeah.
Like, your silly stories don't faze us anymore, right? Like, the base is hardcore. We are all in. We are putting the signs in the yard, even when they get vandalized. We're all in on the Trump campaign. And so, you know, to see that some rando who used to work there is going to spout off without any, like, recorded evidence that something really awful was said by Donald Trump, we just don't believe it anymore.
No, and part of what I said earlier too is we are a more sophisticated electorate, in my opinion, these days. These kinds of stories don't faze us. This story comes out 2 weeks before the election, even though the alleged meetings and conversations where Trump has supposedly said these things happen over 4 years and beyond. So I think that the American people, even if you're an independent, you recognize this for what it is. I think that we're all just more sophisticated these days. Even if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily support Donald Trump, you see this and you think, okay, 2 weeks before an election. Yeah. And as far as the effing Mexican comment, and I feel awkward saying that on the radio, but we all know how well Donald Trump is doing with the Latino vote. So this is obviously
calculated. Absolutely.
Exactly. It's calculated. All right. I got 30 seconds left. EJ, anything else that is on your mind this morning?
Just encourage absolutely everybody to take a friend to the polls. Popular vote is going to be important. So even here in Tennessee, we should make sure that our numbers are really, really high, so that the folks who want to destroy the Electoral College and our entire way of voting don't get any more fodder, win or lose, after this election.
EJ, how can folks find you on Twitter?
Yep. Jump over to X. Find me at EJ Under the Radar.